It began on a quiet evening when the street lights flickered like nervous hearts. The entire neighborhood of Willow Creek Estates had gathered for the monthly HOA meeting, but beneath their polite smiles lay 100 silent grudges. The air was heavy, not with heat but with tension. Every house here had the same white fences, the same manicured lawns, and the same watchful eyes. But one house stood apart, the Delgado residence, a place whispered about in every corner, blamed for everything that ever went wrong in the neighborhood. To the HOA board led by President Marjorie Kane, the Delgados were a stain on perfection. They said the Delgados didn't mow their lawn properly. They said their dog barked too loud. They said their teenage son was a troublemaker. But what they didn't say, what they never admitted, was that the real reason for their hatred was envy. The Delgados had something no one else in Willow Creek did: freedom. They didn't bow to the HOA's constant rules, didn't attend the forced neighborhood parties, and didn't apologize for living their lives differently. And for Marjorie, that was unforgivable. She stood in front of the HOA crowd that night, a woman in her 50s with a face carved from control, holding a stack of papers like a weapon. "Order," she said sharply. "We'll begin tonight's meeting with the primary complaint, lot number 23, owned by Miguel and Rosa Delgado." A few people sighed, a few smiled, the kind of smiles that hide satisfaction. Marjorie flipped through her notes. Multiple residents have reported code violations, noise, property maintenance, and a recent illegal structure behind the garage. Her assistant Linda leaned forward. "It's that shed, Marjorie. He built it without approval. I say we fine him again, make an example." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. But one voice spoke up, a soft, uncertain voice. "Don't you think we're being a little harsh?" It was Ethan Blake, the youngest member of the HOA. He'd moved in only 6 months ago, and he still believed this community was built on fairness. Marjorie's gaze cut through him like glass. "Harsh, Ethan, we have rules. Rules keep chaos out. If we don't enforce them, we lose control. Do you want that?" He hesitated. "No, of course not, I just..." "Then it's settled." Marjorie's tone left no room for argument. She looked around the table, satisfied. "We'll handle the Delgados once and for all." No one knew what she meant then, not fully. But by the end of that month, the HOA's obsession would turn into something darker than anyone could have imagined. The next morning, Rosa Delgado watered her roses under the pale light of dawn. Her husband, Miguel, was still asleep. She hummed softly to herself, a tune from her childhood, unaware of the quiet car parked across the street. Inside it sat Linda, camera in hand, snapping photos through the windshield. She zoomed in on the backyard shed, a small wooden structure that to anyone else looked ordinary. But to the HOA, it was a symbol of rebellion. "Got it," she whispered into her phone. "Marjorie, I've got pictures. He's storing something inside. I can't see what, but it's weird." Marjorie's voice came through, calm but cold. "Good, send them to me. We'll use it at the next meeting." Linda paused. "Marjorie, what if it's nothing?" There was a beat of silence. Then Marjorie replied, "In Willow Creek, perception is everything. If people think he's hiding something, he's guilty enough." Linda looked uneasy but obeyed. That night, the HOA chat group buzzed with speculation. Illegal storage. Chemicals maybe. He's probably running a business from home. We should call the county inspector. Within hours, rumors spread faster than truth. By the weekend, half the neighborhood believed Miguel Delgado was a criminal. Ethan watched it all unfold with growing discomfort. He liked Miguel. They'd spoken once or twice while jogging. Miguel was quiet, reserved, but kind. He didn't deserve this. Ethan decided to visit. When he knocked, Rosa opened the door with wary eyes. Behind her, the smell of fresh coffee drifted into the air. "Oh, HOA again?" she asked bitterly. Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm just here as a neighbor." Rosa hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You're the first one to say that in months." He stepped inside. The house was modest but warm, family photos on the wall, a half-finished puzzle on the table. "Listen," Ethan said quietly, "there's a lot of talk going around about your shed. I thought you should know." Miguel appeared from the kitchen, tall and tired-looking. "I know, they've been watching me." "Then why not tell them what's inside?" Ethan asked. Miguel's eyes darkened because it's none of their business and because, if they knew, they'd twist it. What is it? Miguel looked at him for a long moment, then said, "My brother died last year. I built that shed to keep his tools. It's all I have left of him." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. "They're not going to stop," Miguel continued. "People like Marjorie need enemies. Without one, they'd have to face their own emptiness." He turned to the window, watching Linda's car drive by slowly again. "Let them look," he said, "but someday they'll see more than they bargained for." Days turned to weeks. The HOA doubled their efforts, more warnings, more fines, more public humiliation. Rosa stopped going outside. Miguel worked nights to avoid the stairs. And Ethan, he started noticing strange things: whispers during meetings, documents not matching the records, HOA funds disappearing. Then one night everything changed. A heavy storm rolled over Willow Creek, the sky cracked open and rain hammered the streets. At 11:43 p.m., a single light blinked on in Marjorie's garage. Linda and another board member, Tom Weaver, were there, their clothes soaked. "This is insane," Linda muttered. "You really think this is the only way?" Marjorie's voice was steady. "He built illegally. He's hiding materials that could harm the neighborhood. If the county finds a safety violation, he'll be forced to leave. But first, we need evidence, undeniable evidence." Tom frowned. "And how do we get that?" Marjorie opened a metal case. Inside, small containers of accelerant. Linda froze. "Wait, Marjorie, what are you?" "Controlled damage," Marjorie interrupted. "A minor fire in the shed, no one gets hurt, but when the inspectors come, they'll find unapproved chemicals. The insurance will expose him." Linda's heart pounded. "You can't be serious." "I am, because this neighborhood deserves order." The storm outside masked their fear. And just before midnight, the three of them drove quietly to Lot 23. The rain had eased, and mist hung over the lawns like breath. They moved fast, Marjorie holding the flashlight, Tom carrying the canister. The shed stood behind the Delgado's house, silent and unguarded. Linda hesitated, whispering, "This isn't justice, Marjorie." Marjorie didn't answer. She poured the liquid near the back wall, then tossed the empty container aside. "Light it." Tom's hand shook as he struck the match. The flame flickered, small, uncertain, then caught the edge of the wood. For a brief moment, they all stared as it spread like a living thing. But then something unexpected happened. A flash, a loud crack. The shed door burst open from the inside, and a fireball leapt into the air. Linda screamed as the heat slammed against them. Marjorie fell backward, shielding her face. Tom shouted, "Run, run." They stumbled through the rain, tripping over the wet grass, hearts pounding with terror. Behind them, the fire devoured the shed, roaring louder than thunder. And through the smoke, a figure appeared, Miguel Delgado, standing barefoot in the rain, staring at the flames consuming his memories. He didn't move, didn't shout, didn't chase them. He just stood there, silent, as if he knew. As if he'd been waiting for this. By morning, the fire trucks were gone, the street blocked off with yellow tape. The HOA arrived early, pretending to be concerned. Marjorie spoke to the police chief with her best, sympathetic voice. "We warned him, officer. He was storing chemicals. It was only a matter of time." The chief nodded, writing notes. "We'll investigate." Ethan stood nearby, watching her closely. Something about her calmness felt wrong. When he glanced toward the ashes, he saw Miguel watching too, not angry, not broken, but eerily composed. Their eyes met. And for the first time, Ethan saw a promise in Miguel's stare, not of forgiveness but of reckoning. Later that day, Marjorie received a letter in her mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photo taken from a distance, showing her, Linda, and Tom standing by the shed the night before. Her hands trembled. The note beneath it read, "You thought we didn't know." The sound of that single line echoed in her head all night. She locked her doors, pulled her curtains, and checked her cameras, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fire again. Marjorie didn't know it yet, but the real blaze hadn't been in the shed. It had just started inside her own house, inside her own mind, and soon everything she built would begin to burn. Morning came cold and colorless. The rain had washed away the ash, but not the memory of fire. The Delgado house sat behind police tape, its yard quiet except for the soft crackle of cooling debris. Ethan stood there again holding a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the wreckage. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, bitter, heavy, and accusing. He couldn't stop thinking about the photo Marjorie received. He didn't know who took it, but whoever did, they'd seen everything. And now someone was watching her. Across the street, Marjorie's blinds twitched. She hadn't slept. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through her phone, messages from the board, from residents, from the insurance company. Everyone wanted answers. But her mind was trapped on that single photo. She kept hearing Miguel's calm voice in her head from the last HOA meeting. Someday, you'll see more than you bargained for. By mid-morning, Linda showed up at her door. Marjorie opened it reluctantly. Linda looked pale, her eyes shadowed with guilt. We need to talk. Not here, Marjorie snapped. People will see. Then where? The clubhouse. Marjorie hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes. Inside the HOA clubhouse, the air smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. They sat at the long oak table, the same one where they'd condemned Miguel over and over. Linda spoke first. Marjorie, that fire, it wasn't supposed to spread like that. You said it would be small. It was small, Marjorie said sharply. Something inside made it worse, probably his chemicals. Linda shook her head. We didn't see any chemicals, there was just tools, photos, and she swallowed a metal box. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. Box. Yeah, it was locked, and when the fire blew, it came from that side. Marjorie frowned. Then maybe that's what caused the explosion. Linda looked uneasy. Marjorie, what if he knew? What if he planted something? He's not stupid. Don't be ridiculous. But deep inside, Marjorie's certainty was cracking. If Miguel had known they were coming. Later that day, Ethan went to check on Miguel. He found him sitting in the driveway, staring at the charred remains of the shed. Hey, Ethan said softly, I'm sorry about what happened. Miguel didn't look up. You don't need to apologize for them. I just want to help. Miguel finally met his eyes. Then tell me something, Ethan. Why is it that when someone burns your house down, you're the one being questioned? Ethan hesitated. The police. The police work for the HOA's narrative, Miguel interrupted bitterly. They think I was careless. They'll file their report, take their pictures, and move on. But this, he gestured at the ashes, this was no accident. Ethan wanted to believe him, but belief required proof. Do you have cameras, anything that recorded? Miguel smiled faintly. Of course I do. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. They thought they were being clever, he said quietly, but they forgot I had motion sensors. Ethan's eyes widened. You have them on video. Miguel nodded. I watched it, every second of it. Ethan's stomach tightened. Then why haven't you gone to the police? Miguel's voice lowered to a whisper. Because the police won't destroy them the way I will. That night, Marjorie's security system pinged twice, movement detected in her backyard. Her heart leapt. She grabbed her flashlight and crept to the window. Nothing, only shadows and the soft hum of sprinklers. But then she noticed something strange. On her porch, lying neatly at the door, was an envelope. She opened the door slowly, picked it up, and tore it open. Inside was another photograph, this time zoomed closer. It showed her lighting the match herself, the flame frozen midair. No note, no words. Just proof. Marjorie's knees weakened. She stumbled back inside, locking the door. Who's doing this? She whispered. Then her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A man's voice came through, calm, quiet, unmistakable. Beautiful night, isn't it, Marjorie? She froze. Miguel. You shouldn't have touched what wasn't yours. Her pulse thundered. What do you want? I just wanted you to feel what I felt, helpless, trapped, watched. You think I didn't see you that night? I saw everything. Marjorie tried to steady her voice. If you come near me. You'll what? Call the HOA? His tone dripped with quiet menace. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I just want you to understand what you've done. The line went dead. Marjorie stared at her phone, trembling. For the first time in her reign over Willow Creek, she felt powerless. The next day she called an emergency HOA meeting. Ethan arrived early, curious and anxious. Linda sat near the end of the table, avoiding eye contact. Marjorie entered, her usual confidence gone. "We have a problem," she began. "Someone is trying to blackmail us." Tom frowned. "Blackmail who?" Marjorie's lips tightened. "Miguel Delgado." Ethan sat up. "You're sure?" "I received 2 photos from the night of the fire. Someone was there recording us, probably him. He's threatening me." Linda finally spoke. "Maybe he's not threatening, maybe he's just giving you a chance to confess." Marjorie shot her a glare. "You're forgetting your part in this, Linda." Linda looked away. Ethan folded his arms. "Confess to what exactly?" Marjorie's eyes flicked toward him. "We made a mistake, Ethan. We went to inspect his shed that night unofficially. Something went wrong, that's all." Ethan's expression hardened. "You call arson a mistake?" The room went silent. Marjorie stood abruptly. "This meeting is over." But Ethan didn't move. "No, it's not. You lied to everyone here. You've been using HOA power to target a family. Now you've crossed a line." Her voice rose. "You have no proof." He stared at her. "Maybe I don't, but someone does." He slid something across the table, a small USB drive. Marjorie froze. Ethan continued. "Miguel gave it to me. He wanted me to see the truth. I watched it." Tom leaned forward. "What's on it?" Ethan looked straight at Marjorie. "You." That night chaos erupted in Willow Creek. Ethan had shown the footage to the local police, the press, and half the neighborhood. The video spread like wildfire, grainy, silent, but clear enough to ruin everything. It showed Marjorie and her 2 board members sneaking into the Delgado's yard, pouring something near the shed, then running as it caught fire. Within hours, the HOA chat group exploded. "Is that really Marjorie? She burned their property. I knew they went too far. Arrest her." Marjorie's phone wouldn't stop ringing. She ignored them all. When she finally looked outside, she saw neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering, pointing, filming. For years, she'd been the one watching them. Now they were watching her. The police arrived before sunset. Linda confessed first, sobbing as they took her statement. Tom followed soon after, claiming Marjorie pressured them. By the time they knocked on Marjorie's door, she already knew it was over. But when the officer said, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for arson and conspiracy," she didn't argue. She just whispered, "He set us up." As they led her past the flashing lights, she caught sight of Miguel standing across the street. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just watched, expression unreadable. But in his eyes there was no triumph, only something darker. Days passed. Willow Creek tried to move on, but rumors filled the silence. Some said Miguel was planning to sue the entire HOA. Others claimed he'd bought a hidden camera network months before the fire, almost as if he'd predicted it. Ethan didn't know what to believe. Until one evening, a plain white envelope slid under his door. Inside was a note, handwritten in perfect cursive. "Ethan, you did the right thing. But you should know, the fire wasn't meant to destroy my brother's tools. It was meant to uncover what Marjorie buried years ago. Look beneath the clubhouse basement." Ethan frowned. The HOA clubhouse. He grabbed a flashlight and went. The building was quiet, locked for the night. He pried open a side window and slipped inside. The basement door was old, its lock rusted. He forced it open and descended the creaking stairs. Dust hung thick in the air. At first he saw nothing, just storage boxes and old files. But then, behind a stack of chairs, something caught his eye, a small wooden crate marked with black paint. He opened it. Inside were property documents, bank receipts, and letters, all signed by Marjorie. And among them, one sheet stood out. A deed transfer for a vacant lot, Lot 23, signed over from Miguel Delgado's deceased brother to the HOA president, dated 3 years before the man's death. Ethan's pulse quickened. He flipped through more papers, realizing the HOA had illegally seized that land and built new homes on it, pocketing the profits. The Delgados' illegal shed had stood on the last untouched part of that property. That's why Marjorie wanted it gone. The fire hadn't been about code violations. It had been about erasing evidence. Ethan called Miguel immediately, but no one answered. He drove to the Delgado house, empty, lights off, curtains drawn. He knocked once, twice, nothing. He turned to leave, but something on the porch caught his eye, a burnt photo frame. Inside was a picture of Miguel, Rosa, and another man, his brother, smiling beside that same old shed. Behind the frame, etched faintly in ash, were 3 words. Truth needs fire. Ethan stepped back unsettled. Where was Miguel now? Why did it feel like this story wasn't over? The next morning, the news broke. Marjorie Kane's house had burned to the ground overnight. No suspect, no witnesses. But the police said something strange. The fire had started in the exact same way as the Delgados' shed. And on the front door, written in soot, they found 4 words. We didn't start this. Sirens screamed through Willow Creek again, the second time in less than a month. The neighborhood that once prided itself on control now stood surrounded by chaos. Marjorie's home was gone, reduced to a skeletal frame of charred beams and blackened stone. The official report said electrical malfunction. But everyone knew better. There were no wires left, no trace of accident, only intention. Ethan watched from across the street as the firefighters rolled up the last hoses. Their faces were grim, tired, as if they knew this wasn't the last fire they'd be called to on this street. A detective approached him. You're Ethan Blake, right? You were part of the HOA board. Used to be, Ethan replied. The detective nodded. We're trying to piece together what happened. Any idea who'd want her house burned down? Ethan hesitated. You've seen the video, you know what she did to the Delgados. The detective sighed. So you think this was revenge? Ethan looked at the ashes. I think it's justice, but I'm not sure whose. Later that evening, he sat alone in his living room, scrolling through old HOA messages, Marjorie's endless commands, Linda's sycophantic replies, Tom's silence. Everything in those messages screamed control, manipulation, fear. And yet Miguel had said nothing publicly. He hadn't come forward, he hadn't gloated, he'd just vanished. That silence scared Ethan more than anything. Because silence meant planning. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Rosa Delgado. Her face was pale, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She held a small box in her hands. I heard about Marjorie, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Did you see Miguel? She shook her head. No, not since 2 nights ago. Where did he go? I don't know, he said he had to finish something, then he left. Ethan frowned. Finish what? Rosa opened the box. Inside was a small metal lighter, the kind used for camping, engraved with a single word. Ashes. He left this on the table, she whispered, and a note. It said, truth spreads like fire, let it finish what it started. Ethan's chest tightened. Rosa, you don't think? I don't want to think, she interrupted, tears forming, but I know him, he wouldn't hurt anyone who didn't deserve it, and after what they did. Her voice broke. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. I'll find him. The next day, the HOA clubhouse was sealed by police tape, but Ethan managed to slip in through the side door again. He needed to understand what Miguel had uncovered, the corruption, the stolen deeds, the money. The basement still smelled of smoke from Marjorie's last meeting there. He found the crate he'd opened before, now empty. Someone had taken the documents. Only one thing remained. A scrap of burned paper with a half-visible address written on it. Lakeview Storage Unit 4C. Ethan's pulse quickened. He drove there immediately. The storage facility was quiet, tucked behind an abandoned gas station. Rows of metal doors lined the narrow aisles, each marked with faded numbers. Unit 4C sat near the back. The padlock was broken. Inside, the air was thick with dust, boxes stacked to the ceiling, folders, old signs with the Willow Creek HOA logo. Ethan flipped through the papers and his stomach turned. Tax evasion records, forged inspection reports, illegal property seizures. The HOA hadn't just been corrupt, it had been criminal. And at the bottom of the pile, one folder bore Miguel's name. Inside were photos of his house, his family, his dead brother's property deed, all signed away years before the fire. There was also a letter typed unsigned. If Delgado refuses to sell, apply pressure. Inspection threats, fines, public complaint, make him submit. Ethan stared at it in disbelief. Marjorie had planned this long before the shed. She, stolen from Miguel's family, and when they resisted, she'd tried to burn them out. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside the unit. Ethan froze. He turned off his flashlight, crouched behind a stack of boxes. A shadow moved past the doorway, tall, steady, deliberate. Then a voice. "Find what you're looking for." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Miguel." Miguel stepped into the light, his face calm but unreadable. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan stood. "Neither should you. The police are looking for you." "I know," Miguel said quietly. "They always are. It's easier than asking why." Ethan held up the letter. "You were right about Marjorie, about everything, but this," he gestured around the storage unit, "this isn't justice anymore, it's obsession." Miguel studied him for a moment. "You think I wanted this, the fire, the fear. I think you wanted to make them pay." Miguel's eyes darkened. "I wanted them to feel every fine, every insult, every lie. I wanted it to burn inside them like it burned in me." He stepped closer. "Do you know what it's like to lose everything because someone else decided you didn't belong?" Ethan didn't answer. Miguel continued. "My brother tried to fight them. They called him unstable. He just didn't know how deep their rot went. He killed himself 6 months later." The words hit like a punch. "That's why I built the shed," Miguel whispered. "Not for tools, for proof. Documents my brother saved before they took the land. I kept them hidden until they burned it." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Miguel, what did you do to Marjorie?" Miguel looked away. "I didn't have to do anything." "What does that mean?" He met Ethan's eyes. "Guilt is a fire too. Once it starts, it doesn't stop." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The neighborhood was eerily quiet. No lights, no chatter, just the occasional flicker of police headlights passing through. He replayed Miguel's words over and over. Guilt is a fire too. He wondered what it meant for him. Because now he knew the truth, but he was part of it too. He'd sat in those HOA meetings. He'd stayed silent when Marjorie targeted the Delgados. He'd watched injustice and said nothing. Maybe guilt burned him too. 3 days later, a funeral was held for Marjorie Kane. Only a handful attended: Linda, Tom, and a few neighbors who came out of curiosity more than sorrow. Ethan stood in the back, watching as the coffin was lowered. Across the cemetery, a man in a dark coat stood beneath a tree. "Miguel." Their eyes met once more. Ethan nodded slightly, as if to say it's over. Miguel didn't move, didn't nod back. Then without a word, he turned and walked away. Ethan never saw him again. That night, Rosa knocked on Ethan's door again. She looked calmer this time, almost at peace. "I got a call," she said, "from a lawyer. Miguel transferred the house to my name and he left a letter for you." She handed him a sealed envelope. Ethan opened it slowly. "Ethan, you tried to see the good in people who had none. That's rare. Don't waste it trying to fix a place built on lies. Some things must burn so others can breathe again. Keep the truth alive, but don't look for me. M." Ethan folded the letter, his chest heavy. He looked out the window, the street where it all began. The white fences looked the same. The lawns were trimmed again, new residents were already moving in. But nothing would ever be the same beneath the surface. Because some fires never truly go out. They live on in guilt, in silence, in the cracks of perfect streets. And in Willow Creek Estates, when the wind blew just right, you could still smell smoke. A full month passed. And yet the smoke never really cleared from Willow Creek. The HOA board had been dissolved. The clubhouse shuttered, its windows boarded up. Reporters had long since moved on, but the whispers stayed, floating from porch to porch like ghosts that refused to rest. The name Delgado became something half-spoken, half-feared. Some said Miguel had fled the country. Others claimed he'd been seen near the lake at night, lighting candles and talking to the water. No one knew the truth. But everyone felt it. The fire hadn't ended, it had only gone underground. Ethan tried to rebuild his life. He took long walks alone, stopped answering questions from neighbors, and avoided looking at Lot 23. The new owners were already renovating the property, turning the ruins of the Delgado house into something neat, sterile, lifeless. He hated it. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Rosa came by again. She looked stronger now, her eyes no longer hollow, her voice steady. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, handing him a USB drive. "What is it?" "Security footage from our backyard cameras, the night of Marjorie's fire." Ethan frowned. "I thought they were destroyed." Rosa smiled faintly. Miguel always kept backups. He trusted machines more than people. Ethan hesitated, then plugged it into his laptop. The video loaded grainy, time-stamped 2:14 a.m. 2 nights before Marjorie's death. At first it was just darkness and rain, then headlights appeared. The car. Ethan's heart quickened as the door opened, and there, stepping into the frame, was Marjorie Kane herself. Alive, unburned, weeks after her arrest. She moved quickly, nervously, looking around, then walking toward Miguel's property. She was carrying something. A gasoline can. Ethan froze. Rosa whispered, "Keep watching." Marjorie stopped near the half-rebuilt shed, staring at it for a long moment. Then she dropped the can, sank to her knees, and covered her face. She began to sob, silent, shaking. After a few minutes, she pulled something from her coat, a small bottle of pills. She held it in her palm, staring at it under the dim light, and whispered something to herself. Then she stood, walked back toward her car, and disappeared into the night. The video ended. Ethan leaned back, stunned. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone, she was trying to punish herself, Rosa finished quietly. She came that night not to burn us again, but to beg forgiveness. Miguel saw her from the window. Ethan turned, he didn't stop her. Rosa shook her head. He said some things have to burn themselves out. Her voice trembled. The next morning her house caught fire. He told me it wasn't his doing, he swore it, but he said something I'll never forget. What did he say? Rosa looked out the window, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes justice doesn't need hands, it just needs time. After that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Marjorie's face, not as the tyrant president, but as a woman crushed under the weight of her own cruelty. He thought of Miguel's words, of the letter he'd left behind. He thought of Rosa's quiet strength. And he thought of the neighborhood rebuilt, repainted, pretending nothing had ever happened. But the truth was alive in every corner. The HOA files Ethan had found at the storage unit had since leaked online. Investigations spread beyond Willow Creek, exposing dozens of neighborhoods under the same corrupt management. Homeowners everywhere began to question the rules they'd followed blindly. It was as if one small fire had set an entire system ablaze. Weeks later, Ethan drove to the edge of town, to the lake where people said Miguel had been seen. It was quiet there. The water shimmered under a pale moon, reflecting the cold light of memory. He parked the car, stepped out, and found a single wooden bench facing the water. On it lay a metal lighter, the same one Rosa had shown him before. And next to it, a folded note sealed in plastic. He picked it up and read. Ethan, if you're reading this, then you've come to the end. I didn't burn her house, I didn't need to. Marjorie lived her whole life setting fires in others, in herself. She taught me one thing: destruction is easy. But truth is patient. It waits until people can't hide from it anymore. Take care of Rosa. Keep Willow Creek honest. Don't let the next fire be yours. Miguel. Ethan stood there for a long time, the note trembling in his hand. Then he looked out across the lake, and for a moment he thought he saw movement on the opposite shore. A faint figure standing still beneath the trees. Tall, calm, watching. He blinked and it was gone. But he smiled anyway. Because somehow he knew Miguel wasn't gone, not completely. He was part of the air, the silence, the justice that lingered long after the flames. Months passed. Willow Creek was quieter now. Without an HOA, the neighborhood slowly softened, fences grew uneven, flowers bloomed wild, children played past curfew. It wasn't perfect anymore. But it was alive. Ethan and Rosa started a small neighborhood trust, a volunteer committee that helped residents instead of punishing them. No fines, no rules, just fairness. Sometimes people still whispered about the fire, about Miguel, about Marjorie. But nobody spoke with hate anymore. Because deep down, everyone knew what the fire had really done. It had burned away fear. One evening, Rosa invited Ethan for dinner. They sat in her backyard, the rebuilt shed standing quietly behind them. She'd turned it into a garden workshop now, filled with roses, herbs, and a small wooden sign above the door. For Gabriel. Ethan asked softly, your brother-in-law. Rosa nodded, Miguel's brother, the one they stole from. She looked at the sunset, her eyes warm but sad. I think Miguel built this shed to remember him, but it became something else, a mirror. It showed everyone who they really were. Ethan smiled faintly, and now? Now, she said, it's just a place for life to grow again. They sat in silence, listening to the wind. Somewhere far away, a dog barked, the smell of soil filled the air. And for the first time in months, Willow Creek felt peaceful. That night, as Ethan walked home, he passed the old HOA clubhouse, now abandoned, its walls cracked and faded. He stopped, staring at the doorway. Someone had spray-painted across the front in rough, uneven letters. No more rules, only truth. He smiled sadly, touched the words with his fingertips, and whispered, "You got what you wanted, Miguel." Then he turned, walking away into the quiet streets. The camera of the mind would linger there, over the neighborhood bathed in soft lamplight, where fences no longer mattered and people spoke to one another again. And in the faint breeze that rustled the trees, there was a whisper, not of anger, not of vengeance, but of something gentler. Forgiveness. Because even in the ruins of what burned, something new had taken root. Something stronger than control. Something purer than power. It was truth, and it had survived the fire.